Let's take a look at our questions here. There's a lot to take a look at. The real principle we're trying to convey here this evening is we can work together. That's really what I want you to see is the big picture of everything that we've studied with all of the apostles, and that is that we can work together, and we need to work together. So, a few questions to start. If you're married, this would be the question I would ask you. Are you and your spouse exactly alike? Heard some chuckles, right? No, you're not. But do you have to work together? Yeah, we have to work together. Even though we're not exactly the same, we don't have the same personality, don't have the same background, same skill set, but God expects us to work together for a common cause. If you're working, do your coworkers have exactly the same skill sets or exactly the same personality that you have? But does the boss expect you to get along and work together to accomplish the goals that he set out? Yep. So we have to figure out how we can work together. And as the church, do we all have the same personalities? Do we all have the same skill sets? Do we have the same experience? Obvious answer to that, right, is no, we don't. But does God expect us to work together? The same common cause? Well, I think a great template for that is the apostles. And so, first question was just simply this. The 12 men that Jesus chose as apostles, they were men of varied backgrounds. And we've gotten into those backgrounds and we've gotten into those skill sets and personalities. So what do you think are keys to success when we work with others toward a common goal? What are some of the keys to success?
Keeping the goal in mind and having patience with your team, being receptive to new thoughts and ideas.
Okay, keep the goal in mind. I think that's important. Let's remember what the goal is here. Being patient with one another, because we do have different experiences and skill sets, and where I'm strong, somebody might be weak. Where I'm weak, somebody else might be strong. We have to work together. Those are good ideas. Anything else? We need good leaders. Okay.
Of course, the apostles had the best.
That's true. And following his lead as the good shepherd is going to help us as we work together. So yeah, we need good leadership, because sometimes when there are those personality differences and issues, Jesus had to deal with some of those things. Everything wasn't picture perfect all the time with the apostles. They had their times where they were upset with one another and they had to work through some problems, and Jesus certainly aided that. So it's good. We need good leadership. What else?
Honesty and communication.
Honesty. We've got to be willing to be honest about and with one another. We got to communicate our concerns, our frustrations. Sometimes we have to make sure that we communicate those things in a respectful, dignified, loving way. Communication is important, and how we communicate things is important as well. That's good.
Consider the person's background. All of us in here have different backgrounds and different environments. And that can have an effect, and you have to understand that everybody has the same background that I do.
I think that's good. We have to consider other people's background. If you read Romans is 11 chapters of Paul contrasting a Jewish background to a Gentile background. And some of the applications have to do with, now that you understand the background with a Jew, the background of a Gentile, and the differences, but also some of the things we have in common, which is we've all sinned and we all need Jesus, then we've got to learn to work together despite our backgrounds. And so part of Romans emphasizes that very thought. TJ, is that a hand? No? Yes? Yeah. Yes.
I think unselfishly working together with a goal in mind, with our goal in mind, and we're trying to help each other make it to heaven.
Okay.
And we'll come together.
That's good. Unselfishly working together. Did you have a hand up? Yes, sir.
it's been rather a bit difficult for me in many respects, like cooking and cleaning the house. I don't have a moment that I can say, "Boy, that's mine." And after my wife was sick about 2 weeks, I woke up one morning and I looked around. I said, I don't feel different. And I think I lost about 20% of my memory. It was like shock therapy, I guess.
Well, where you've lost your memory, hopefully Trieber can kick in and be your brain for you sometimes, right? And where her legs aren't working right, sometimes you gotta be the muscle, right? We have to learn to work together in those situations. All right, those are all great ideas. Now, as we think about the apostles, we've got a lot of different men with a lot of different backgrounds. We've got impulsive Simon Peter, who's got leadership qualities, but sometimes he does foolish things. We've got Andrew, who just quietly leads people to Jesus. And we've got James and John, the sons of thunder, who sometimes are a little hot-headed about some things. Grew up as fishermen, so they have a certain background. We've talked about Philip a little bit, Bartholomew, Matthew the tax collector. So we've got somebody that's working for the Romans among the apostles. We have Thomas, who sometimes had his moments of doubt. He needed a little bit more reassurance than some of the others. Simon the Zealot, he comes from an interesting political party. Thaddeus, James, Judas, and of course Judas betrays Jesus. So we've got in that apostolic band somebody who was a hypocrite, even though he was close to Jesus. And so a lot of different people. As you think about those people, and as you think about their common goal, what do you think the common goal of the apostles really was? Because that was one of the things that was mentioned. We need a common goal. What's the goal of the apostles? Discipleship. They need to learn to be disciples. They need to learn to disciple. Yes, they're trying to get other people to become disciples of Jesus. That's their job. Go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature, make disciples of all nations. That's the Great Commission. And take a look at some of these passages. Matthew 20, verse 18 says, Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore, and so this is what he tells his apostles, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. This is the mission. This is the goal. This is what they're trying to accomplish. Take a look at Ephesians chapter 3, and the mission, really, according to Paul, as he writes to Ephesus, is very similar for us as the church. It says in verse 10 of Ephesians 3, through the church, the manifold wisdom of God needs to be made known to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly places. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers. So a lot of those roles are roles that we fill in the church today. And he says he gave us those things to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for the building up of the body of Christ. We go on, verse 13 says, until we all attain to the unity of the faith. That's one of our goals. We want to be united in the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God to mature manhood. We're trying to help one another mature in Jesus, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. Verse 14 says, so that we may no longer be children. We're trying to move people to maturity, no longer being children in their faith, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, it makes the body grow so to build itself up in love. Words that I emphasize when I'm looking at this would be verse 16. Every joint, each part, every single person in the body of Christ needs to have this same common goal. We're trying to help people mature in their faith in Jesus Christ and give up the immaturity so that they can fully know and understand Jesus. And so we've got to work towards that common goal. Yes, sir.
This is hard to do, but I think any of this has to start with yourself. Know how to take a good self-examination of yourself. If you can't do that, you're not going to be too successful judging other people or whatever.
It's a good point. Each part, each person, every joint, you've got to examine yourself and make sure you're doing what you're called to do. I can't control what other people are doing, can I? All I can control is myself. And so I've got to make sure I'm doing my
This
best.
is larger than the local church. The whole body is worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Each of us has a connection with the head, and this whole body is growing as each person grows.
It's a good point. It's written to the church at Ephesus, but you see the emphasis on apostles and prophets. These are again, universal roles that the apostles play in the church as we help one another. All right, so unity is essential to doing the Lord's work. It's really one of our goals as we think about the lesson here today. Now, according to Ephesians 4, there's various traits that are necessary in Christians if we're going to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So I've already written some things. I kind of already did this question for you on the screen. I don't normally do that, but I did today. So just think for a moment about what the opposite of these traits are. When you read Ephesians 4, you see that we're told in Ephesians 4, verse 1, Paul writes, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you, that's a begging word, I'm begging you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called. Now notice verse 2, with all lowliness and gentleness. I like to point these out. Before we get to the ones that he mentions in verses 4, 5, 6, 7, I like to look at the attitudes that have to exist before we ever get to the ones. So the attitude number 1, with all lowliness, humility, and gentleness. The opposite of that would be someone who's arrogant, somebody who's prideful, somebody who's harsh with other people, somebody who's abrasive in how they talk to other people. That's the opposite of this. And if we have that type of attitude, it's not going to help unity. It's going to hurt it. It's going to hinder it. So Diotrephes is a great example, right? He likes to have the preeminence, and he's very abrasive when it comes to other people. He's not a humble person. He's an arrogant person. And we're to be warned by his behavior. So the next phrase would be this. It says, with all lowliness and gentleness, and then with long suffering. Sometimes the word would be patience. The opposite of a long-suffering person is a short-tempered person. I'm not long-suffering with you. In fact, I get irritated with you. I lose my temper with you quickly. That's the opposite of long-suffering and patient. When you're short-tempered, when you're impatient, and sometimes when you're hypercritical, that can be the opposite of a long-suffering, patient person. One of those qualities is going to help us work towards unity. The other one is going to blow it up and oftentimes cause division and hinder the progress. We're bearing with one another. Bearing with one another. The idea of bearing a pack. We're bearing with one another. The opposite of that is when you quit on others. I'm tired of bearing with you. I'm tired of trying to work it out. I don't want to work it out anymore. I'm just going to quit. The opposite of bearing with one is when we quit on each other, when we're unwilling to persevere through the trials and through the difficulties, and some people just quit. And then the next phrase is to do it in love. The opposite of that would be to act with hatred towards people, to act selfishly instead of selflessly sacrificial. And then he says, endeavoring to keep. Another phrase that might be used in some translations is eager to maintain. I want to keep the unity. I'm eager to maintain unity. That has to be our attitude. I don't want to blow things up. I don't want to see division. I would like to keep us unified. But some people are just looking to get their way and sometimes looking to divide. Sometimes they're very lazy and don't make any effort to unite. And it takes effort. It's an endeavor. It's work to try to work towards unity. And so I want to emphasize some of those things. Do you guys have anything that you would add to that point as you think about, sometimes the reason why we have church problems is not because we can't work it out. It's because we don't want to work it out. We don't have an attitude that is conducive to working things out and being united. And it starts with our attitudes. We really have to get our attitudes in check if we're going to work through the problems that are inevitable in any relationship. Husband, wife, co-worker relationship, church relationship. We've got to get our attitudes right first for that to happen.
I think commitment is something that I would say above in those others, but if we have commitment to the Lord, to the working out of it, becoming one and united, then we'll look at people that maybe we differ with in a better way.
Mm-hmm. Good. That's a fair thought. Good thought. You guys are pretty quiet. Well, I guess I'm preaching too much. Everybody's just sitting back and just letting me go.
This whole thought through here is being kind of tolerant of those that are weak, but not tolerating error.
Mm-hmm. Say that again. I'm sorry.
To me, it's the whole idea through here, building each other up, but being patient and tolerant. It's being gentle with those who are weak, who haven't learned yet, and not being harsh and abrasive and tearing them down instead of having to build them up. Not tolerating error, but trying to gently correct it in love.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. When we move on to the things we've got to be unified on, he's not saying it's okay for us to tolerate things that are wrong, but as we work towards that, and as we try to get people to that common understanding, it's going to take these attitudes to make it happen. So I think that's a good point. So he says, I, a prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness. We have to be gentle with each other, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. All right. How will a lack of unity affect the work? When we're not unified, how's that going to affect the work? It's going to be... You're not going to get much done when you're not working together? Yeah. Yeah, if you're working against each other, that's true in the workplace, right? You're trying to work towards something, somebody's working against you, you're not going to get the project done. You're not going to get the work done. You've got two different approaches to how you're doing it. So we're going to have to try to work in lockstep with one another. Let me give you a few ideas. First of all, it's hard to worship when you're not united, isn't it? That's why Jesus spoke in Matthew 5:21-24. He says, before you bring your gift to the altar and you know that you got a problem with somebody, then you need to go fix that problem with somebody before you offer your gift. Reconcile with your brother first, because it's really hard to honestly worship God in unity with your brethren when you have an issue with your brethren. And so we have to fix some of those things. It's going to hinder your worship. It's hard to evangelize when we're not united. You know, hey, come be a part of our church. We hate each other. Who wants to be a part of a church that's divided? How are you going to evangelize people and say, come be a part of the body of Christ, but we don't like each other at all? We've got to be united. We've got to learn to love each other. If people want to be a part of a family that loves each other and works through things together, they want to be a part of that. But it's going to be hard to teach people. And Jesus taught that, right? By this they will know you are my disciples if you love one another. You've got to learn how to be one with one another, he said to his own apostles. It's hard to show hospitality when we lack unity. I mean, do you want to invite somebody over to eat that you're in a quarrel with? Not really. It's not going to be very entertaining. It might be very entertaining dinner, but not for the right reasons. So we need to work some things out because we're going to enjoy one another and the time we spend with each other more so. And we need unity in matters of doctrine. Thus saith the Lord, versus areas where the Lord has left it up to us individually. And so doctrinally we need to be united. Take a look at Ephesians 4:4-7. Which I think is here. It says, there is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. These are areas where we've got to be united and in agreement. I'm going to guess, I'm going to guess Ed probably has a sermon series on each one of these. You have sermon series on all these? You're,
Are you ready?
yeah.
I do try to emphasize this, particularly when you deal with that and the nature of your relationship.
This is a key passage, and we could talk about it quite a bit, but I'm just trying to emphasize there are areas in which we need to be united and work towards unity, certainly when it comes to these things. Is there also room for differences, though?
Yes.
Yeah? What kind of differences? That's a good question. Yeah. Romans 14, I think, tells us some of the differences that we can have. We take a look at Romans chapter 14, which I didn't put up on the screen, of course. But there are areas in which we need to be tolerant of one another. A few things that are offered there in Romans chapter 14 is when it comes to certain foods. We're actually going to talk about that Sunday morning in our Colossians sermon series. We're looking at Colossians 2, 16 through 23, where he mentions, do not touch, do not taste, do not handle certain foods. We're going to look at that. And it says, let no man judge you in food or in drink or keeping of Sabbaths, things like that. And that's very much in agreement with what Paul's writing here in Romans 14. We would expect Paul to be in agreement with himself. But he talks about those who eat certain foods. We need to be tolerant of one another. He talks about people who keep certain days. Some people do keep a certain holiday. Some people don't keep a certain holiday individually. We need to be tolerant of those things. He goes on and mentions several things here, and he talks about, I think, the key principle, verse 19, let us pursue the things which make for peace and the things which one may edify another. Let's make sure that we're working towards peace with one another. Without this turning into a Romans 14 lesson, I would just encourage you to consider the fact that there's things that we need to be united about, Ephesians 4 type things, and there's things where we need to be tolerant and understanding of one another and not judgmental towards one another. Romans 14 verse 13, let us not judge one another anymore about some of these things he's just talked about, things that make no difference in the new covenant, but rather resolve this. Don't put a stumbling block or cause a fall in our brother's way. Ed, go ahead.
My purpose in asking that question was not so much in our individual practice. I think that's what Romans 14 is dealing with. It's not dealing with congregational practice. But we do have to be united and unified in what we do together.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. We need like a whole lesson on this now. How do we do that? How do we get to that? I think I know where you might be headed with that. Pat?
I think we need to not be too critical, like when young men become Christians and start to take part in the services. We've been places where if they do anything wrong, they just get jumped all over.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to realize that they are young and they are learning. And I saw an older brother one time when the service was about over. He raised his hand and he said, I need to come up to the front again and say something. He had forgotten to ask for prayer for someone who had asked to be prayed for. And he bowed his head and asked just for that for the Lord to be with that person. And I thought it was a great example for young people that even older members don't always do everything right, but it's a learning process. And I've seen young people not want to participate because they knew they would be criticized harshly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Being patient with those who are in the maturation process and understanding. We're going to kind of make a slightly different point also of having some confidence in our young people and the fact that some of them are extremely capable, but sometimes we look down on them just because they're young. And so that's kind of where we're headed with this next point here. When it comes to working together, sometimes we're tempted to look at a person's age. When Saul first looked at David as he sought to fight Goliath, what's he say about him? You're just a youth. I don't know what you're doing here. You're too young to be here. You can't do this. What did Goliath say about David?
pass it on, that you take after me with sticks.
Yeah, you just brought some little kid out here with sticks. You've disrespected me by letting David come out here and fight against me. David's own father, what's he seem to think about him?
Just a shepherd's boy.
He's just a shepherd. I don't think he's the one you're looking for. I've got these older, stronger boys, and that's probably the one that you're going to want to anoint as the next king. But was David capable? He certainly was. And one of the simple lessons I think we learn from that is that be careful that you don't despise someone's youth. They may be fully capable of being a help and a strength to the church. And sometimes we look down upon them just because they're young. Sometimes we need to put some trust in our younger generation. All right. When it comes to working together, sometimes we might view somebody as unskilled. You can't preach. You didn't go to a certain school, right? We have that sort of thinking sometimes. But what did Jesus do with untrained Galilean fishermen? He used those people to teach the world. And it's noted that they're untrained Galilean fishermen in Acts chapter 2. What's God able to do with the Apostle Paul despite his lack of eloquence? Uses him to go take the gospel to the rest of the world. And yet, Saul would say himself, 1 Corinthians 2, I'm not eloquent. He kind of it seems like some attack he was receiving from perhaps some of the Corinthian brethren was they would make fun of his speech or the way that he looked bodily, and yet he was extremely capable. They were looking down upon him just because he wasn't as smooth a talker as others. What's our role in training others?
They might train others.
We got to train people so they can train people. We are disciple-making disciples.
He specifically said that to Timothy. What you've learned from me, you commit this to faithful men who can teach others also.
Mm-hmm.
That's the training school.
Mm-hmm. It's not the mentality of preachers, teachers, the Timothys of the world is not, well, I'm the one with all the training. Everybody just needs to listen to me. The mentality of true disciples is I need to share whatever knowledge I can, whatever training I can with other people so that I can equip them to go out and do the work too. I don't want to be the chief person people look up to. The more people that we equip with the gospel to share it, then the more people that we're going to see converted to the Lord. And so our goal is to share it. And so we got to have some trust in some other people, equipping other people.
In verse 24, it says, the servant of the Lord must not be quarrelsome, but be kind to all, able to teach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we put too much emphasis on the messenger rather than the message.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. And I think that's one of the points here that we're trying to make is let's listen to the message and let's entrust the message to faithful men. Don't focus so much on the messenger. All right, we keep going through here. Sometimes we don't feel confident in ourselves or our readiness to do the work. Take a look at some of the following leaders. We got Moses in Exodus 3. Did he feel confident he could do the work? No, it was all about excuse in Exodus 3 and 4. And God meets every excuse and responds to it to let Moses know, no, you're still the man. You're the one that I picked. You're the one that can go out and do the job. If you got a problem speaking, I got Aaron here. He can be your spokesperson, but you're still the person that I've called to let my people go. And so he still chooses Moses. You've got Saul. How did Saul feel about being picked as king when he was first picked? He hid. Yeah, he's hiding behind an ox cart. Where's Saul? You're going to make this big announcement, and he's hiding. He doesn't want to be up there. I've seen people in public speaking classes are kind of like that. They're like, please don't call on me. Please. They're hiding. That's Saul. He didn't feel like he was ready for the role.
Unfortunately, he didn't keep that attitude.
He certainly did not. He became quite arrogant over time.
I think there's a certain amount of humility in Saul to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was little in his own eyes.
Yeah.
the beginning.
Sometimes that's a good thing when you have that trait. You don't feel confident, so you trust more in God. And then you become overconfident and you're trusting in yourself. There was a change in Saul for sure. Then Jeremiah, he says, I'm just a youth. I don't think I can do this work of prophecy that you're asking me to do. I'm just a youth. They felt they lacked confidence. They felt very incapable of fulfilling their roles. But what lesson can we learn from their examples?
That's the kind of people God chooses, and that's the kind of people He wants to use.
That's right. Yeah, God's called you to it. He can help you through it. So trust in His power, in His strength to do what He's called you to do.
I think God gives us opportunities to push the boundaries of what we think we can do.
Mhm.
And when we don't take advantage of those, we're missing out on a lot
Mhm.
of our potential.
Good. These are good thoughts. In the Corinthian church, did they all have the same role? No.
They had gifts that differed from one another.
1 Corinthians 12, I mean, we could read this whole chapter, but what important lessons are taught throughout the Corinthian text to help the church embrace the various roles and skill sets and individuals within the church?
Each role is needed.
Each role is needed. Every single one of you is important. You don't all have the same role, but every person's role is important. And so don't be arrogant thinking that one role is better than the other. I'm better than you, or my gift is better than your gift. Everybody's gift is important. Mm-hmm.
A man that speaks in a tongue needs someone to translate if he's going to speak public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we help each other out with our various skill sets and gifts and abilities. So avoid arrogance. There's a lot of points I think we could make from the text on that. Encourage each other in the working of these gifts. Of course, I didn't put 1 Corinthians 13 in here. What's the ultimate? What's going to be the ultimate quality that strengthens us all? Love. Yeah, we're going to have to work together in love. And then the qualities of love are listed in 1 Corinthians 13. You're not always going to have the spiritual gifts, but you are always going to have love. And so you need to really lean into love if you're going to make it through the difficulties you might have as a congregation. All right. I did put all the text in here, but we don't have time to read it. Ultimately, the key to their success is love. And so let's just finish with that passage. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1. I think the bell's going to ring here in just a minute. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but if I have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, if I deliver up to my body to be burned, but I have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't envy or boast. Love is not arrogant or rude. Love doesn't insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It doesn't rejoice at wrongdoing. It rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. I don't think this is a complete definition of love. I think we could look at other passages and we could see other qualities of love, but I think this is the definition of love the people at Corinth needed. If you look at everything that they were dealing with in chapters 1 through 12 up to this point, Paul is attacking a lot of the things that they were having problems. You're having contentions where you're not being patient, you're not being kind. You're jealous of this person's gift and that you don't have it, you wish you had it. Love doesn't envy, love doesn't boast. You're bragging on yourself. You're with your father's wife in a sexually immoral relationship. Love doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing. Love rejoices in the truth. Paul, with every single phrase here that he talks about with love, he's actually dealing with a problem that the church at Corinth had that could be solved if they would lean into love with one another. All right. Thank you for the quarter. Thanks for studying along with us.